Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Wondergo Chineem and I love talking about wisdom. I'm holding in my hand what is called the Rubik's Cube. I like carrying this around because I like to use it to test my decision-making processes and results. And with these, as with most decisions of life, one wrong turn can take you back to square one or leave you with what is known as the unintended consequences. So today I'd like to talk about decision making and the risk of unintended consequences. You'd be shocked, or let me start with a story that I once read about. It's the story of an army general that fell into the well, and they got his subordinates to pull him out. And every time they got the cord of 3 strands, threw it down, and he held onto it, and they were drawing him up. When he got to a certain point, he would just notice that he has fallen back, because as he approached the top of the well, the subordinates would see his rank and quickly salute. And to salute, they had to let go of the rope. And he fell down back. After 3 failed attempts, he suddenly shouted, "Get my mates!" Because in getting his juniors, they had not paid attention to what is known as the risk of unintended consequences. These junior officers were always going to salute him. So, but if you got his mates, it meant that they would just salute him and there wouldn't be anything wrong, right? So it's just saying that there's what is called unintended consequences. So it's a known fact that decisions have consequences. And Dr. Mike Murdock defined wisdom as the recognition of consequences. Because every action, according to Newton's law, says to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's Newton's third law. The way the earth is set up is that there are laws and there are consequences to obeying or disobeying such laws. So naturally, every action has a consequence. If you don't sleep, you're going to wake up tired and you have to be at work. You see, so the problem is that some decisions have more than one consequence. Wisdom is the recognition of consequence or consequences. So you can try to solve a problem because you realized what is the consequence of that problem. However, it is wisdom to try to decipher all the other unseen consequences that you may not be seeing. For instance, there's a young man called Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the son of King Solomon, the renowned King Solomon, the wisest king in the Bible times. And because Solomon went away from the path that the Lord would have him go, God promised him that he was going to take away his kingdom, but he wouldn't do it in his lifetime. Then Rehoboam comes on the scene. Remember that Solomon was going to be king, and he went to the Lord after offering 1,000 burnt offerings. God met him at Gibeon in a vision and asked him what he would want. And he said, "I need wisdom and understanding to judge these your great people that have been called to lead." And God said, "Because you have not asked for riches or wealth or the life of your enemies, I'm going to give you this and more." But his son comes up. Instead of towing the same blueprint, he goes to confer with different sects. He asks the elderly and the young what he was supposed to do for them, for the people. Because before that time, they had come to him to say, "Please, the burden of taxation that your father laid upon us was too great. Can you please bring us succor?" And the elderly people said, please listen to this guy, listen to them and see what you can do for them. Then Solomon confers with the young and they say, these people are trying to test your flanks. They see that you are young. They see that they feel like you might be a softer version of your dad, so they're trying to take advantage of you. Don't even think of giving in to them, because if you do, there's no telling what will become of your kingdom. And because Solomon was only seeing the present, he became paranoid. And paranoia has a way of accentuating falsehood. For instance, the children of Israel were crying to the Lord, and the Lord sent them succor and a deliverance in the person of Moses. When they got to the wilderness and they started facing hardship of lack of water and food, what did they say? They said, we were better off in Egypt, where we had cucumber and garlic and onions. These were the same people that God met Moses in the burning grass and said, I have heard the cry of my people and have now come down to answer them. These were the same people telling God that they were better off feeding off garlic and cucumber of Egypt. So paranoia has a way of accentuating falsehood. When you are paranoid, everybody and everything starts to look like it's against you. Sometimes even what is meant to be judgments, calls where they are correcting you and telling you that this is what you may or not, or you should or shouldn't do, you will receive it as from the lenses of pride. So this was what happened to our dear beloved Rehoboam. And Rehoboam went and said to the people on the day they were gathered to hear the verdict, he said, my father chased you with whips, but I, Rehoboam, son of Solomon, will chase you with scorpions. The words had not dropped from his lips when the great echo and cry of the people went forth, to thy tent, O Israel. And that day, he lost rulership of 10 tribes. Imagine being a king over just 2 tribes when you could have had 12. This is the risk of unintended consequences. There's always something you're not seeing. That is why I described wisdom as your perception of reality based on your knowledge of the relationship between the seen and the unseen. A body continues in its present state of rest until it is acted upon by an external force. That is Newton's first law of motion. It means that nothing changes until something happens. So there is always a consequence for an action, whether good or bad. So you could be a Jabez and go to the Lord and say, enlarge my coast. You could be a Hezekiah and go and tell the Lord that, remember all of the good things I've done for you. Please lengthen my days. And the extra days added to you will become what will cause God more pain than the earlier times you had lived. There is always unintended consequences. And for me, if you're a leader making a judgment call, this should be an obsession for you. And the way to know this is to make yourself a person that questions paradigms, always ask questions, or make sure that you validate your thoughts, not just validating your question, your thoughts. Make your options. As a rule, I always say, when I'm seeking a thing of value, I don't buy from the first shop I see. Except, of course, is open sourced and maybe commonly sourced. Say, for instance, I'm going to buy sugar to take tea at home. I can just stop by any shop and buy it. But when I want to buy a car, I won't take from the first dealership, except, of course, it's brand new. And even if it's brand new, I would want to check out other sources to ensure that I'm getting a comparatively good price. There's always the risk of unintended consequences. Let me end with a story that I heard, just to give you perspective. I read from John Obidi when he was talking about first and second order thinking. When the British first moved to India as part of their colonization efforts, they realized that the whole colony was filled with snakes. And then they put a bounty that there was going to be, let's just, for instance, say £1 for every snake killed. Oh my God. The citizens went into overdrive. But because the British, had not cared to make proper findings to know that the Indians were not people who are really scared of snakes. As a matter of fact, snakes represented a lot of their gods, and they considered them pets. These Indians went ahead to build cages and started to rear these snakes as per snake husbandry. The consequence of that action by the Britons was that every day the Indians brought home snakes to collect bounties, but the snakes in the land were not reducing. When the Britons tried to make their inquiry, they found that these guys had been rearing the snakes, so they cut off the bounty. But now they were left with even greater problem, which was that there were now more snakes in India than when they first put out the bounty. This is the risk of unintended consequences. Their failure to pay attention to the first tendencies of the Indians caused them to take a decision that was not well-rounded, and that led them to have more snakes in the land than what they would have intended. So, we would always say, know the arts of the sciences, study the science of the arts, understand that everything is connected in some way, so that you don't make decisions that are devoid of real life worldviews. Always ensure that you've done your research. Always ensure that you ask questions end to end, so that you don't become like Rehoboam, who makes a decision without paying attention to the grave consequences, or the consequences that he didn't intend, which was losing 10 tribes. I cannot say this enough. I'm hoping that this will be an unraveling discussion as we go forward, but I just want to believe that you have been blessed today and that you understand my point, that you must pay attention. Right judgment is what makes great kings. Solomon was one, and God wants you to be one. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one. God bless you. Bye.